have come here this evening to tell you 3 stories. We will first go to a basement in a Christian monastery in Algeria. Second, I will travel with you to a wood carpentry workshop in Madagascar. And finally, we will visit a bakery academy in Harlem, in New York. During my career in international development, I have been very fortunate to meet and work with many amazing people and women changers and change makers. However, I have also been faced with many dire situations. People who were living in poverty, people who lived in refugee camps or who had been displaced by war, and also women refugees who were suffering out of sexual violence and many different pleas. But even in those very difficult circumstances, I always found a good reason for optimism. And in fact, I saw that solutions can arise even in places and from people that you don't expect. And I hold a very strong belief that women and girls have a huge potential. It's been my experience working in over 10 countries, working to advocate for and with women changemakers and community leaders everywhere. However, I have to be very honest with you tonight. I deeply thought that I shouldn't be the person to stand here and speak up. Because what feminists say is that the floor should be given to those people who experience hardship. And I am not Malala. I am not Nadia Murad. And I am not one of those invisible change makers who deserve to have a voice. But however, what can I do? I can bear witness. I can be a promoter of these women change makers. And so can you. And so what we will look at today are some of the learnings, and I will share some stories from those years of travels and experience working with NGOs and working in global foundations. What is the truth after encountering hundreds of community leaders in the field, visiting many homes, and also supporting social enterprises to grow and develop, is realizing that we need together to work on building stronger leadership support for these women. And it has been an experience of a journey, making sure that we ask the right questions. Some of these questions include, how do these women working and living in very dire circumstances dare to overcome the stereotypes that they face in their communities? How do they actually find the inner strength to dare to confront some of the conservative views and conservative approaches? How do they actually learn to become role models? And so before we jump into some of those stories, I want to remind you of a few facts. When we look at the world today, we see a series of non-stopping humanitarian crises. Actually, the world is facing one of the most acute moments in terms of number of people who are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. We're speaking of over 130 million people. 75% of those people are women and children. And so it is so important to understand that in conflict, during natural disasters, but also when the populations have to move, they're displaced by war or by conflict, there will be moments in which women will be made much more vulnerable because they will face food insecurity, they will face sexual violence and economic vulnerability. And for girls, the situation might be even worse because they can very significantly increase their risk of early marriage. Today, one example comes to mind when we think of those particular contexts. It's Afghanistan. And if you remember 2 years ago in 2021, we had a shift when the Taliban took over Kabul again. And from that moment, we realized that lives of women and girls in Afghanistan would be very strongly impacted. Indeed, their mobility is drastically reduced. They do not have access to education. In many cases, they cannot work anymore. And they don't even have the time or possibility to self-organize. Their lives have been drastically impacted. But even in that particular environment, we still have numerous Afghan advocates, gender advocates, who will be standing out and defending their rights and claiming better situations. So, as of such an extreme example, how can we zoom into more individual level examples? As I was founder, I used to work in selecting projects and supporting women throughout the world with funding and with project supports and promotion. We realized that giving them a voice also was vital. And so we organized training in Algeria for 25 young feminist leaders. And these girls were defending their rights. And if you know the country, it's quite a challenge to overcome those barriers in that context. To such an extent that the actual workshop could only take place in the safe room of a Christian monastery, where we had to hide pretty much for 3 days. And as we worked through some of the obstacles that they were facing, we helped them build confidence, we gave them tools to network among themselves, even if they were spread out in a big country. One of the girls came to us and told us her experience. Her name was Fatma, and she was 19 years old. She was already very tired, not me. And making sure that Fatma could express her story, she gave us an example. She told us that she was so tired and angry that people resisted her desire to be free, that she put up a sign and went and stood on a traffic crossing in the middle of her very conservative neighborhood. To her astonishment, she didn't get harassed. The police didn't come down to remove her. People were finding this situation so unusual that they just passed by and looked at her. And she realized that, in fact, she could dare. She told us that, of course, she had taken a big risk, but by standing there powerfully, she built so much inner strength, and that gave her a new flow of energy to build her activism back. And what Fatma taught me as an observer there is that she overcome her strongest barrier, which was the fear to be exposed. Another piece of information that I picked up over the years is the power of economic empowerment of women. For example, when I visited a microcredit organization in Madagascar, we were told, yes, we're going to this rural area and we will encounter an entrepreneur. We drove, the road was pretty bad. And as we got into this remote village, suddenly they introduced us to a house with lots of wooden, beautiful carpented fabrics and furniture. And to our surprise, the entrepreneur was a woman of a certain age, to not say an elderly woman. And she came to us with full confidence. She had received a loan, she had received financial literacy training from the NGO, and she was now a leader in her community. And she had managed, also by her will and her wit, to build enough support for her business to grow and herself to build further independence. And I found it very impressive to see all the young girls of the community looking up at her. So her example tells us that we also need to provide resources and economic means for women to develop economically. But all these very dire circumstances, fragile environments, and very conservative environments are not the only places where women's empowerment and leadership takes place. We all know it happens everywhere. For example, one of the programs that we visited in the USA was located in one of the neighborhoods of New York, in Harlem. We had volunteered to spend an entire day there. It's a baker's training program. So we went all the way through to the Harlem subway station. And to our surprise again, the kitchen facility was located just under that bridge. Very surprisingly, the neighborhood was very dire, low income. Many people were standing there. But as we opened the door, we found over 50 women preparing and cooking bread, packing the bread and sending it up to shelves. And we had an amazing experience. The entire day there gave us a full, different vision of what the collective power of such training programs could bring. The founder was a social entrepreneur, and her idea was to provide work for immigrant women in this very male-dominated food industry. And she had succeeded over the years to gain the support she needed. Therefore, what we learned from this experience is how a powerful idea can bring collective results. And so where do we stand now? I personally feel extremely lucky that I had the opportunity to visit all these women and to bear witness. But maybe you can do it too. Have you ever met a local association leader in your own town? Maybe the mother of a child in your school is a war refugee from Ukraine. And maybe somebody in your vicinity has suffered domestic violence, but has found the strength to overcome this situation and has gotten safe. So every single person can provide the leverage for this women's empowerment to happen. And in my view, what we need to acknowledge is that women's leadership continues to need support and acknowledgement. So coming to this conclusion, how will you promote women as champions as of today, as of tomorrow? What I really hope is that we will together continue on this journey for a more inclusive and a more peaceful future for all. Thank you very much.